All right, I'm joined today by my colleague, Coach Katelyn Tocci. All right, Coach, we got you here in the locker room. We're going to talk all about marathon goal setting. And I know listeners out there, viewers out there, if you're watching us on YouTube, you're thinking to yourself, why are we talking about goals right now? My marathon isn't for another couple of months. Like, whoa, slow the horses here. You're giving me anxiety. Chill out, Michael. Why are we going to talk? We're talking about this today because, Katelyn, I think goals are a big part of the marathon process, the build process, the training block process. I know I think about my goals throughout my however many weeks of training. It's something that occupies my thoughts during my easy runs, my long runs. And it's something that I'm sort of like, always kind of adjusting in my head what my goals are going to be and what my plan is. And what's this future in marathoning? Why do I do this?
I think to be even more intense, I think I have a lot of goals going in, like to the first very weeks of training. So don't worry, you're not as intense, I think, as I am. I've got the goals thought out even as I'm, prepping for base training.
Yeah. So, and we'll break that all down. So we've got a nice, tidy table of contents here that we're working off. Our show notes, they're exquisite. We'll have to just maybe I'll just copy and paste it into the transcript. It's so good. So we'll stick to the plan here today, and we're going to walk through our approach, both as experienced marathon runners, experienced distance runners. We've been in the game for a long time. And also, Katelyn, obviously you're a certified coach. You're somebody who coaches a lot of athletes, a lot of marathon runners of various stripes in order to achieve their goals. So we're going to go through your learnings. One of these words I love, your learnings that you've accrued as a coach with your training over the years and your experience coaching athletes of all ability levels. Awesome. Okay, so let's get right into it. First things first.
Let's go.
Let's do this. We're starting with an acronym. Let's get technical. Understanding SMART goals. Now, this is capital S, capital M, capital A, capital R, capital T. So what are SMART goals, and why do you apply this strategy when you're coaching athletes?
And this goes back to my 19 years as a high school teacher. We use SMART goals. This has been in the works for a long time, but it applies to all goals and running goals. We need to make our goals attainable, right? We can't just arbitrarily choose a goal for our marathon and say, if I just wake up one morning and I want a marathon like Michael, I want to be like Mike, I want to run a 2:40 marathon. That's it. That's what I want to do. I have to say, hold on, wait a second. And as a coach, I say, hold on, Katelyn, wait a second. Let's take a look at this. Let's step back and let's make a SMART goal. So are we going to go through the acronym, Michael?
Let's do this, because
are we going to go?
All right. I wonder if we have the same acronym here, because
okay.
I went based off the dorky business school approach to using SMART goals, because we'll give you a little history lesson here on where SMART comes from in a second. But what's your acronym stand for?
Okay, I've got specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. For those of you who haven't heard of the SMART goals before,
I have a variation on the theme. I got specific as well. Okay, so we're on the same page. Okay. I got measurable. Good. Then I got assignable, which I think it's because in management consulting, assignable is makes a lot more sense, right? But I guess I sort of apply that in my own head to if you're your own boss in marathoning, you're to use a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reference here, if you're Krang inside of that robot that he controls, you're pulling the levers on your own body. You're your own marathon boss. You get to be Krang. So, children.
I love it. I love it that we're from the same generation, Michael. We can talk. Alex wouldn't even understand.
He doesn't even know what a Ninja Turtle is. Alex.
Sorry, Alex, you're not here to defend yourself.
Let's pick on poor Alex. He picked a week to go on vacation, didn't he? Okay, so
that's right.
I'm at A, right?
Okay, assignable,
and then realistic is the R, and then which we can riff on that too, right? Because I think that's a huge component to goal setting. Huge,
right?
And a big problem with with running. Being realistic with
Yes.
yourself, and then
Uh-huh.
time related, which would be just creating a time frame for achieving these goals that's realistic and that you can kind of telescope out and plan appropriately. So
Right.
we'll stick with yours, but I'll sort of add my thoughts based on this on my version of the acronym. And I will say, because I promised it off the top, I did a little rabbit hole reading on where this came from, and it was
I love when you do this research.
coined by
Go for
our
it.
boy George T. Doran in the November 1981 issue of the Management Review, which I
Okay.
believe is a academic periodical. I don't know if it's still around anymore. I don't know if they're still cranking out the Management Review. Maybe they are. But that's where this thing comes from. It's something we've all heard of before. We've all heard about SMART goals before, but
Yep.
we're going to use SMART goal, the idea of building out SMART goals, just to frame this first section as we talk about
Yep.
how we do this whole marathon goal setting thing. Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's
Yes.
start with specific.
Let's go
Yeah.
for it. Let's go with specific. So we want to be like, okay, I want to complete a marathon. That's what we're talking about right here. So if it's any distance, I want to complete my 5K, but we're focusing on the marathon. So I want to complete my marathon. That's a specific goal. We can make it much more specific with time, right? If it's time based, but that's more kind of moving into measurable. Like I want to complete the marathon. I want to do a sub 4 marathon, or I want to do a sub 3 marathon, or I just want to finish the marathon healthy and safely and get across that finish line. And then if I say I want to run a sub 4 marathon, is that achievable? So that's the next part that we're going to there. Like, do my previous races, my training log, my tests, which we're going to get into in a little bit, do they reveal that my paces are enough to be able to work towards the sub 4 marathon? Is this actually realistic for me, or do I need to kind of take a step back, or is it actually going to be too easy and I need to maybe adjust there? Relevant, I guess we would talk about in general, does this marathon time and this marathon goal align with kind of all of my fitness goals or my life in general?
Am I being honest with myself? Yes.
Exactly. Am I lying? Am I being honest? Am I lying to myself? And the time bound goal, for those of you out there who decided, I don't know, October, I don't know, someone gave me this number for New York and I'm going to run it next month. Probably that is not very time bound. We want to make sure that we have enough time to train for our goal as well. So make sure that you have the specific amount of time to train for the specific goal that you want. What do you have to add in there, Michael?
Oh, these are all great. And in fact, I feel like you were like, you could just, we could overlay many of our notes and they just sort of like literally read the exact same way with this specific in terms of like, yeah, just, I wrote down literally whether it be sub 3, sub 4, just finishing, particularly if it's your first marathon,
Yep.
which is a totally noble goal. Now, I would say
Right.
that just finishing should also entail the process that we're going to talk about, sort of process-based goal setting as well in the next segment here. But I think that that's a really important factor, because otherwise you get the cliche of the couch to marathon, where the person's like literally 2 weeks before the marathon, they're like, I'm going to sign up for a marathon and complete a marathon so that I can put that on my like life resume or my Tinder, profile or whatever. It's like
Where's my bucket list? I just want to check it off and not really train for it in the way that's necessary.
Yeah, we're not talking about bucket listing. And I think that if you're listening to this podcast and you're probably at some stage of dyeing yourself in the wool, being the dyed wool of being a marathon runner, if that is an analogy I can work. I never actually tried to frame being dyed in the wool in that way before, but yeah, if you're into running to the degree that you're listening to running podcasts, I think you've graduated past the kind of BS approach of just like, I'm just going to struggle through this without having trained for it. So we're talking about it with some training involved, right? Yeah. I would say that as you said before, with the realistic approach, and we can unpack this in a bit more detail, but like it's really tricky,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when you're early on the marathon running journey, to kind of identify exactly what you should be targeting if when we're talking about external kind of time-based outcomes like
Mm-hmm.
sub sub 4, sub 3, BQ, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into that those specifics down the line here in this chat. But yeah, so how do you start applying smart goals to enhance marathon training?
Exactly. Okay. Well, I think when you're speaking to your coach or if you're figuring out on your own, I think one of the most important things that you need to do is really have a handle on your fitness level and not just, I mean, I have absolutely had athletes and myself way back in the day before my coaching days, you know, choosing this arbitrary goal for myself and thinking that I would be able to achieve it without really doing, you know, the research first and check my training logs and check how I've been doing recently and just say, wait a second, is this actually possible? So what I would do, and as a coach and what I have my athletes do a lot of the time to check their fitness level is I love doing a test. I mean, I'm sure all of the athletes hate taking the tests.
The fitness test. Yeah.
The fitness test. I'm a big one. Like if you don't have a very recent 5K or 10K time, then we're going to take a fitness test. So it's probably either going to be a 3K or 5K, which
Giving
is
me anxiety.
not fun.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? I know. It gives me anxiety also because it's like a one-shot deal. Running a 3K or 5K or 10K as absolutely fast as you can without burning out, kind of like trying to take tests and doing them well. Someone can also be really good at taking tests, or someone can kind of, like Michael's saying, have a lot of anxiety and have trouble taking those tests. But we'll take that data, that time, that total time. And I love to use Jack Daniel's VDOT calculator. I feel like all of the times that I've used it, it's been pretty accurate. And so, you know, we plug those times in, it spits out some estimations for us. It gives us training paces, and we kind of take a look at that to get a guideline of like, this is where we are right now. And then there's always, which I'd like to hear Michael's thought on this. If during the marathon process, if you retest a few months later or you don't retest, that's always something that's in there that I have my opinions about. But at least you want to start off with some sort of a test, some sort of a guideline, and say, okay, this is what right now is my estimated marathon time.
And
is that how would you do it?
That's great. We should say that Jack Daniels is a exercise physiologist in the U.S., not a maker of fine Tennessee whiskey. Although I love the
oh yes,
I love the
Sorry,
idea
yes.
that like there's a dude that distills whiskey somewhere in rural America and also is a master at programming in you know, endurance athletes training. I love that idea. I love that. I love
hilarious.
the idea that they would be the same person, but alas, they are not.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I've used VDOT over the years. VDOT is nice because it's this number. You can also use any other version of metrics. This is where, not to plug Coach Katelyn Tossi's excellent coaching abilities, but this is where having a coach or someone that you can get feedback from, someone who's experienced, can help you make these decisions, right? Who has this this expertise, this knowledge of like how to define that number, and to time you on one of these you know, fitness tests. An alternative, of course, is just get yourself in a local 5K and suffer through it, and then get that number. And you know, if you don't like that number, I don't know, do another one in a couple of weeks, I guess.
Do it again. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And which is tricky, but I think being honest with yourself and being okay with starting at whatever the starting point is, and also embracing this idea that it's the situation is fluid, that your fitness is going to change and improve over time, and that if you want to get into the game of measuring your fitness every month or so, either in a workout or with you have to be careful about a run being like a race being too demanding because you're going to have to
Hmm.
recover. Like I wouldn't recommend doing a half
Right.
marathon every month to test your fitness over the course of a training cycle, because a half marathon will start to eat away at you over time, and
Right.
you won't be able to run your long run, or you'll have to take a couple of days off to recover, that sort of thing. So, but a 5K you can bounce back on. You can replace a workout, that sort of thing here and there. I would consult with a coach on that one, or stick to your training program. And
Yep.
my main piece of advice here, and this is something that I have to remind myself as I start a training cycle, is your numbers, your paces, especially if you get a training plan and you're looking at it and saying, run this block of lactate threshold pace, which is just a fancy word for basically kind of what you can do all out in 1 hour. But it's working a physiological system in your body, which is very important for distance running. If your program says run this amount of tempo, or lactate threshold, or whatever way you want to call it,
Hmm.
that number might and probably will improve over time. But it's cool to start at a certain point. You're trying to break say you're trying to break 3 hours for a marathon. I know it's a pretty ambitious goal for a lot of people, but say you're trying to break
I would love that one
Caitlin.
day.
Say
Yes, that's my
Caitlin, for
yes.
example, you're trying to break 3 hours in a marathon. Just we'll pull a number out of the sky
Oof.
here.
Oh
Um,
boy.
you don't need to go and just like identify what the lactate threshold range is for the sub 3 hour marathon, and identify what the marathon pace is specifically for 2:59:59, and then just hold yourself to that from day
Right.
one, because that's not what your body understands, and it's not where your body is at. You need to figure out where
Exactly.
your body
Exactly.
is at, start at that point, and then, hey, maybe it's 3:06 right now. Maybe that's kind of the
Right.
ballpark you're in. You might be able to work towards 3 hours. You might not. This is where goal setting is important. You got to kind of like telegraph out. Maybe it's going to take you 2 or 3 cycles of training to get
Right.
to the sub 3 ballpark. You may not be a sub 3 runner, who knows? But if you're like in a
Right.
starting point of 3:06, you're probably going to be able to get to sub 3 at some point. And the same goes for any other distance. I know maybe I'm using a big kind of ambitious number for a lot of our listeners,
Yes.
but same goes with sub 4 as well. So that's my thinking.
Yeah. I think that it's I think maybe a lot of marathon runners, especially if you're just starting out, you're in your first or your second marathon, I think it's super important to understand, because in the beginning, it's amazing because there's so much progress
Yeah.
so quickly. I feel like it's
Oh,
it's
I miss that.
incredible.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. I love training new runners as well, because it's just so exciting to see those big leaps and jumps and goals. And I remember that I was in, like a fitness plateau where for 3 years, my 3K test was just like shaving seconds off, just like a few seconds off. And so and you have to understand that those seconds are still gold. It might feel frustrating, but don't get so frustrated with those seconds, because it gets harder and harder to shave those seconds down. And I think that that's super important when you're thinking about goals, is to be like kind to yourself and not think that like, no, every time I'm going to, shave half an hour off my marathon. Like it's impossible. You just have to be, well, not impossible. Nothing's impossible, but you know what I mean? Like you just have to be kind to yourself with that kind of stuff, and be patient, because I have some amazing friends, runners here in Costa Rica, who I have watched just fly, and they do a lot of sub 3s, sub and they're shaving just minutes off every year, and they're working so incredibly hard. So all of that is, it has a lot of value. Every minute counts. And so just remember that it's not like always shaving off a ton of time. Like a couple minutes can be a really big deal. So you just have to put everything in perspective when you're putting your goals together.
I just had a little aha moment where I was like, future pod from our us two middle-aged hack runners is the what do you do when you've plateaued? How do you set goals that aren't
Yeah,
time-based goals? We'll
that's a good
we'll
one.
put a pin on that for a future pod.
Yep.
That's a good Caitlin Michael episode. And the next time Alex
Yeah.
is next time our 20 something our old Gen Z
Yes.
young millennial is on vacation again, because he's got
Yep.
so much time left. But we'll pivot. Actually, let's pivot into, this is a great opportunity to unpack this whole idea of process-based goals versus
Yep.
outcome-based goals. Nice segue, Katelyn. Just chef's
Yeah.
kiss there. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between the two. Tell me what a process-based goal is, and then we can get into outcome-based goals as well.
Okay. And if you're a listener who's heard a lot of these podcasts, we've mentioned this a couple of times. I think we actually even gave some of our preferences. I feel like as a runner, I'm a very process-based goal runner. I love process-based goals. It's more looking at the training rather than the race. So you're looking at your whole training process, the whole cycle, each phase within the cycle, and process-based goals are basically like getting there. And skills, routines, maybe you want to quicken your cadence. Maybe you want to eat a healthier diet. Maybe you want to work on your posture. Maybe you want to make sure you get enough sleep. For all of you sleep deprived runners out there.
Yeah, I'm working on
it. There are a lot of process-based goals we can look at. And I am one of those people who absolutely loves to train. The race anxiety is something that I'll do it and I'm enjoying when I'm at the race, but I prefer to train a million times more than race day. So I really enjoy process-based goals, and I think that they're important within the training cycle to kind of enjoy those and set those mini goals throughout the process.
Yeah, I think knowing yourself is really important with distance running, and it's this incredible opportunity for you to learn more about who you are as a person, because you're putting yourself under stress, you're putting yourself into adverse situations, which is a really beneficial thing. It's like in terms of personal development and growth, it's very valuable, distance running. And I would say knowing whether or not you're a process-based person or an outcome-based motivated person is a really important factor in understanding how to become a more complete marathon runner. So I would say I am like you, Katelyn. I love the process. I love training. I love the odyssey of training. The story of training. And I like the outcome. I like some racing. I don't love racing. Whereas I know many runners who are all about racing, and the training is just a means to an end to race. And they love signing up for races, and they're going to do throughout a marathon build. They'll do 5Ks in the summer, 10Ks towards the end of the summer, and then they'll want to do one half marathon, and they'll be itching to do a second half marathon in their block, but they'll back off because they want to nail the marathon. And I'm not like that. And as I've aged, I've actually and kind of matured and become more, experienced and self-aware with what I'm capable of in a marathon. I've done less racing, and that's in part probably me avoiding something I don't really enjoy, which is those outcome-based drivers. So I would say to become a more complete runner, you almost want to know what version of a runner you are. Are you a process person or an outcome person? We're all kind of both. But if you're more an outcome person, maybe you want to challenge yourself in order to become a better marathon runner to focus on process more. And that's a good, doing a little Russian nesting doll thing here. That's a good goal within the goal, right?
Right. Yeah.
And in my case, maybe I need to race more, stick my neck out, embrace a little bit of safe failure so that I can learn a little bit more about myself along the way, challenge myself more with more racing. But so let's pivot to talking about outcome-based goals, because I think they can be dangerous and they're important to understand.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of our listeners, for both of us, the outcome-based goal is the huge driver in what you're doing. And it's kind of how often you shape your training and you shape your goal setting, right? It's
right.
Yeah. So tell what's it.
All right, let's get into this.
Yeah.
So outcome-based goals, as you can probably decipher, are centered more around the race, right? So your outcome-based goal will be, did I finish the marathon? If your goal was, I just want to finish the marathon. Was I able to finish the marathon? Or did I get my sub 3? Did I get my sub 4? Did I get my sub 5? Did I get my time? Maybe even some runners are actually trying to place right? So they say, okay, within my category, within my age category, I want to place within the top 5, the top 10, the top 3. So you have all of these different outcome-based goals. And I think it's great to have outcome-based goals. And I think we're going to pivot into something super important about outcome-based goals, because just having one is a little dangerous. Having one big outcome-based goal, because it's very easy for something to go wrong on race day. And it's very easy to not hit your outcome-based goal. So I think that's why it's important to have, your process goals. I mean, to me, there's nothing better than having like just a really awesome workout where I said, like, I hit all my paces, I feel amazing. And you have a lot more chances to have great workouts than you do the big race. So I think they're like nice little mini victories that you can celebrate along the way, kind of like to motivate you to work towards your outcome-based goals.
Before we move on to the next segment within this conversation about marathon-based goals, I want to define something that I kind of like this. I think if you're listening out there and you're in running media, don't steal this, please. Katelyn, please steal it, because we're on the same team. I call it the sub trap, and this is an outcome-based goal pitfall. It's the sub 4, sub 3, sub 250, sub 240, sub 230, the sub whatever trap.
Yep. Yeah.
A cousin of the
That's
sub trap is the BQ trap. Yes. I need to BQ. I need to run whatever it is below the BQ for my age group in order to make sure I qualify. The Boston qualifier, like to get into Boston. And while that stuff is hugely motivating, it's also very ego driven. And this is the nice segue into the role of the A, B, and C based goals. And I also got D, E, F.
D, E, F. Just keep it going.
Really, like as many as you want, but just not exactly. Just A, not just an A goal. So let's talk about how you implement, both as a runner and as a coach working with athletes, A, B, and C goals. And just, for the person out there that is totally new to all this, and they're like, hold on, do I need more than like just finishing as my goal, or more than just sub 4 hours is my goal because that's what my roommate ran last fall and I want to kick their ass, like let's define the A, B, and C's.
Okay. I of course use A, B, and C goals for myself. And when I sit down with my athletes and we're starting to figure out the whole process, and throughout the process, we have to, adjust goals. I always suggest that we put together an A, B, and C, and it's worked out really well. And sometimes you get your A, which is the super ambitious goal, right? That you've been training for. It's not that it's out of your reach, but it's really ambitious, and you need the stars to align, and you've got to have a great day, and you're going to have no tummy trouble. You got to be able to,
oh boy,
always back to it.
I promised we wouldn't talk about poop this time. Okay, let's stay focused.
Nope, I'm staying out of it. Okay, nothing happens. You have no niggles. Nothing's bothering you during a race. All the stars align, and you're able to get your super ambitious goal that you've been excited about. But if the stars do not align, which I wonder if my stars have ever aligned, you have to go to B. So B is a realistic but attainable goal, but still challenging. Don't think that like we're throwing in something that just isn't easy and you just have like a cop out. It's not that. It's just that first A goal is pretty ambitious. And the second one is a little more realistic, where like you could think something could go wrong. I could forget to take a couple of gels and maybe still get there. Or I could feel, it could be a little hotter out than I expected, but I would still be able to keep that pace. So I would say, that could be your B goal. And then for C, you want to have sort of a fallback goal. That's something you're still going to be proud of, but something that, this wasn't the day, it wasn't in the cards. And I never like to say times or anything for races because, and it's not that I feel I'm not superstitious or anything. I just feel like embarrassed about what I'm trying to work towards, or I don't know. I don't usually talk about my times, but for the marathon that I just ran, I had 3 goals. I had the A, B, and C goal. And the A was a time that I had been training for, that I had been shooting for. The B was a time that I still thought was fast for me, and that, I was going to be reaching for that. I would be super happy. And my third goal was, well, I want a PR. Okay, so I've got, my super ambitious goal, the training paces I've been working on for all of these months. The second one where, okay, be super happy. This is just like a little under the training pace, and okay, beat my PR. And in Revel, I got my C goal. Okay, wasn't my best day. I got my C goal, but I was super psyched because I was still able to PR, even though it wasn't what I'd been working towards all those months. And so you still feel motivated. And during the race, when you're in a marathon, if you're on pace or you're not on pace. There are signs everywhere. You know what mile you're in all the time. And so if you're looking down at your watch and you're figuring it out, you're like, all right, yeah, okay, I'm just not going to make it. Let's switch over to B, or let's switch over to C, but let's just keep going and stay motivated. And I think that helps you get through it and be proud of what you're working for. You got any good stories for that, Michael?
Oh, I mean, well, we're going to do a DNF pod when we get Alex back from vacay and unpack.
Oh, yeah.
Is it ever okay to DNF? What is a DNF that did not finish? So I won't stamp on that too much. Just stay tuned. Subscribe to our podcast so you can hear us talk about our DNF stories. And
yeah, you guys don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
We've got some doozies.
Spoiler alert: Katelyn gets dragged off the course in a 100-miler. No. So no, I think I always have at least an A, B, and a C, and sometimes as I said before, I throw in a D, an E, maybe even an F.
Yep.
And what I do is what often motivates you to sign up for a marathon is you're like, I got something to prove, something I want to do, something I want to achieve. It's often the A goal, right? It's the, I want to qualify for Boston. It's the, I want to finally crack 3 hours in the marathon. It's the, right. I've been running for 2 years since the pandemic started. I feel like pretty fit. I'm starting to try these long run things, and maybe I want to do a sub 4 hour marathon as my first marathon. That's like a pretty ambitious goal for a lot of people, and that's awesome.
Right.
So you're kind of coming into it with that A goal. And then what I do is I start my training block. Usually you got to, as Coach Katelyn just said, you got to figure out your starting point, do a fitness test, right. Get some sense of where you're at. Then you start training with those numbers in mind, with a training plan in mind. Find yourself a training plan. It's a site, marathonhandbook.com. We've got training plans.
I've heard of it. Yeah, it's a good one.
Plans for everything, every distance, every time-based goal, just finishing goals, first marathon, and so on and so forth. Or ping Katelyn. She'll help you. So don't ping me. Don't ping me. I'm not a coach, but I can give you some informal advice if you'd like. But have that A goal in mind. And then you start kind of working through your season, working through your training block. You start thinking about how the A goal is going, whether or not it's realistic, as we were saying before, if it's fitting in your time plan. And then also start thinking about the B and the C goals. And then I revisit my A goal when things are getting closer to marathon time, to go time. And I start asking myself tough questions. Did this season, did the training program go according to plan? How many long runs have I done? How's the volume been? What are the numbers looking like? What are the workout numbers looking like? Maybe you ran another fitness test or a prep race along the way. What did that number point to? Fire it into a few different calculators. There's the Macmillan calculator. Google Macmillan running calculator. That's a good one. Use the VDOT calculator. You're going to get all of these different numbers, and you can put in some different parameters. We have a calculator. Put it into our calculator. Don't pick the sexiest number. Don't pick the one that's like, you're going to kill it. You're breaking 3 for sure. Whereas the other 3 are like 306, dude. You're 306. Sorry.
Exactly. Yep.
Maybe, be honest with yourself. And that's a way you can kind of like refine your A goal when you get closer to race day. But throughout the season, I always spend a little bit of time, especially when you're doing like one of those easy runs, middle of the week by yourself. Instead of listening to your favorite running podcast or just enjoying thoughtless silence for an hour, start working through that idea of what the B and the C's are. What is something that will motivate you, that will inspire you to continue working through a very hard process, which is running a goal race, running a marathon? What's going to drive you to get through that? What are you okay with? What will
Mm-hmm.
still, what will still, yeah, inspire you to keep going, which is
Right.
a huge factor, particularly if you're pivoting off of your A goal. And also something that I keep in mind in the marathon, there's no marathon is going to be sparkling and a clean sheet. Every marathon
Mm-hmm.
is going to have its ups and downs, its challenges. So you need to be able to maybe pivot off that A goal temporarily, and then settle down. Maybe your heart rate was a little high because you're running the Chicago Marathon and there's 45,000 people around you and you're not used to it. It's the first time you've ever run a major marathon in your life, and you're like, it's freaking you out. And the first 5,
Mm-hmm.
10K, you're not settled, and you're like, this A goal, I'm hitting this number, but I'm really stressed and my heart rate's really high and this feels really
Mm-hmm.
hard. But maybe you just needed a few K to kind of tamp things down, chill things out, and then you can pivot from goal A to goal B. And then by maybe kilometer 15, you're like, I feel really good. Suddenly it's
Mm-hmm.
feeling easy again.
Crank it up.
Bring it back to goal A, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so then goal C, Katelyn, I like actually having a goal that I can go back on that is not a time-based goal. I like to have a
That's a
goal.
good idea.
Yeah. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, especially if I'm a guy who's always going after, numbers that are, I understand, like they're not numbers everyone's running, like, a sub 240 marathon or whatever. But it may surprise some to hear, but like, I like to have the just finishing as a goal. Like that is something that
Yep.
you need to think about and put into context that marathoning is hard. And what we're
Yep.
doing is taking a big risk with these A and these B goals, and we're putting it out there, and it may not pan out for you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you should be proud that you've done the marathon. And those who know me, I'm sure you're rolling your eyes right now. You're like, oh,
There he
here we
goes.
go. Or like, what BS? He's obsessed with times. But I actually always do backload this idea in my mind. I spend time throughout the season thinking about this, where I'm like, every marathon is an experience. It's a little
Mm-hmm.
mini epic, I like to describe it as, like a little odyssey unto itself. And it's something that I can guarantee you will not be happy with yourself if you step off the course. I can guarantee you
Right.
finishing is more is always rewarding on some level. And
Yep.
the ego,
Then giving up.
yeah, the ego pain of not delivering on the goal time you were thinking you were going to hit hurts in the short term, but in the long term,
Yep.
having finished the race is always valuable. So I always have that in the back pocket. I'm like,
Yep.
things get really dark and I've made some horrible decisions throughout the race where I've got myself in trouble. I'm just going to get this thing done. So I would always say
Yep.
back pocket that finishing. Um,
Absolutely. No, and I think that you are actually segueing or teasing even more into our podcast about the DNFing,
mhm.
because I think this is something that we are really going to unpack in that episode. So, thinking about two things that you mentioned. One, finishing and the importance of finishing and not being like, no, I'm just going to give up and just step off because I'm not going to get my time, which I think is, no, we'll get into that later. And the other one is problem solving, which is a huge thing, right? Problem solving throughout the race. How are you going to problem solve throughout the race? As you just mentioned, Michael, about like every marathon has its ups and downs. Every marathon's going to have an issue, whether it's going to be the weather that you're unprepared for, or you can try and prepare for, or whether it's going to be, I don't know, something ended up happening with an aid station and they didn't have something that you needed, or you were banking on seeing someone at this mile point and they couldn't get there for you, so you didn't get your bottle, or I don't know, something could always go wrong. So I think problem solving is a super important thing that we need to keep in mind, and we'll get into later, to not get too off topic, but I thought that was important to kind of show out there. And about just finishing being a goal and not having time-based goals, it could also be something like that. Like this race, I'm not going to hit the wall at 32. This race, I'm going to get my fueling right. This race, so you can have other goals like that are super important, and other details that don't have to do so much with, the time or the position you finish in.
Yeah, and I'll give a little shout out to someone I'm surprised that I'm going to give a shout out to, because not sure how I feel about him as a human being, especially having read a lengthy feature about him a couple of months ago that detailed his rather grim personal life and behavior. But the famed podcaster and neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, who's Alex's boy. Alex actually has a really good video on our YouTube about how he tried to live the Huberman method for a month and see if it affected his running in a positive way. And
Right.
I'll give Huberman a lot of credit. He's got a great pod on goal setting, in sort of in the abstract, kind of like life goal setting for the most part. But there's a lot of interesting details, and that'll put it in the show notes. Actually, it's worth sharing. And it's a lengthy pod, so it's like an hour and a half long, but there's a lot in there. I think there's a lot in there for marathon runners as well. And one of the takeaways for me is like a couple of things he said that I thought were really interesting were, one, you have to keep in mind that making mistakes or making errors is a really valuable component to a process and you have to actually allow for, and there's some research done on this, you have to allow for about 15% of the time to make errors throughout a training process, in our case with the marathon, and also in the race itself. In order to become better at the marathon, embrace this idea, like you said, problem solving, and embrace this idea that the marathon is not going to be a perfect experience. It's not going to be it's not going to be just like your A goal gets smashed and it's this extraordinary, better than your wildest dreams, your float to the finish line. That is not the marathon. It's not the reason why we're drawn to it. It's not the reason why it has a reputation it has. I mean, it's literally named after a place and time in history where a dude ran for a really long time to achieve an end goal and then died, right?
Died.
So,
right.
It's got that reputation. But Huberman in his pod on goal setting refers to a paper that basically is like, it's a total fallacy that, sorry, Kipchoge, that nothing is impossible. And you need to do this thing that I think a lot of people these days lean into, because like the Instagramification of our lives, where it's just like, try, have like massive hubris and just try stuff. And like, you don't know what you're capable of. So just like really try and reach really, really far and you will achieve your dreams. That's a terrible approach apparently, but then also being super conservative and being like incremental about your progress and, really careful and setting yourself up for success so that it's all very sort of easy and reassuring and and confidence boosting would be a nice way of saying it. Ego feeding would be another way of saying it, is also a poor approach. And the science says, try to aim for about 85% success and 15% making mistakes, because your brain plasticity apparently reacts to those mistakes, but you can't make too many of them because then it gets chaotic. But you need to insert about 15%. So think about it when you're running your marathon and maybe not everything's going according to plan. Just embrace this idea that like, hey, my brain is growing in plasticity and I'm getting better at this, and you can practice those things. Be like, okay, this is a tough moment. Let's think about how I can learn from this. So I would say that's a really beneficial approach, or really like to think about, Coach Katelyn, I want to pick your brain about this, but to think about it all being a process, right? To go back to process-based goal setting, where it's like every race is an opportunity to practice for the next race and to learn from your mistakes for the next race. It's not the be all end.
Yep. Exactly. And I think what you mentioned about, if you flew through the finish line, so swiftly and easily for your A goal, then it wasn't an A goal, right? So we have to get back to that as well. Like an A goal has to be an ambitious goal and it has to be challenging. And so then you would have fallen into that group of, no, I'm just going to make the goal super attainable and super easy. So I just get like this great confidence boost. But I think at the end of the day, we all know if that wasn't challenging enough for us, and, to try to push ourselves a little bit and have that ABC and push ourselves for those really ambitious goals and see if we can get there. So I think that's why, I think that's one of the reasons why we're going into all of this and why it's so important, because maybe it seems like a pretty simple thing to do. And we all say, yeah, but I can just set a goal. But there's really a lot that goes into it to make sure, it's not too tough. It's not too easy. It's going to make you feel good. You're going to be proud of it. And yeah, sometimes we're going to have a lot of ups, or we're almost always going to have ups and downs. I know I've spoken a bunch about my girl Courtney Dauwalter before, the best ultra marathoner I think in the world. She always talks about her pain cave, and her goal. This was her goal in in Hard Rock that she just ran a couple of months ago, that she just won and broke her own record. When everyone interviews her before the races, they're always wanting her to say something about time, about place, about record breaking, and what she said before the last Hard Rock race was, my number one goal is to spend less time in the pain cave this time around than last year. That was her A goal. And guess what? She said she did not achieve it. She spent a lot more time.
She did some rearranging of the furniture in the pain cave. Maybe she installed a new LED panel to watch the Olympics this summer in the pain cave. She vacuumed the pain cave. She had a nap in the pain cave. She woke up screaming in the pain cave. Yeah. Actually, that actually, to do another hat tip to our boy Hubes here, is he talks about how there's a lot of science around the fallacy of positive visualization and the reality that negative visualization is actually more effective, which surprised me to hear. Because so this whole idea of like constantly visualizing yourself crossing the finish line, 2:59:59, and then you're leaning and dipping and getting it or whatever, and this is an incredible moment, is in fact less effective and can be not effective at all, apparently, according to some studies, by comparison to instead engaging your amygdala, a portion of your brain that is the flight or fear response gets triggered in that area of your brain. And that's apparently more powerful than the reward-based system where you're like, where it's positive, 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 where instead it's like, it's Tuesday, it's 7:30 p.m., it's pissing rain outside, you've got, 8 miles to run, it's mid-season, you're straining to be motivated, and apparently thinking about it in terms of like, if I don't do this on marathon day, I may fail, is actually more motivating and actually produces more success. And I don't know if there's been any studies done on this, but like, I don't know how you would even do a study, like rig up the little, like, the sensors on the brain or whatever, but like while running a marathon. But I don't wonder if like in the beginning of a marathon, the starting gun pistol, that weird beeping noise goes, we're all running, and you're so caught up and you're tempted to run a little faster because it feels so easy because you've tapered, and you're like, oh, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to break my A goal. I should adjust my A goal to make it even better. What am I doing? I'm so awesome. Mm-hmm. His suggestion is instead you should be like, be afraid because this could go really badly. Tamp it down, stick to your to your number, maybe even start off with the B goal and not the A goal, as long as you can bridge the gap between the B and the A. So maybe if you're trying to run under 4 hours for the marathon, maybe don't start off at 3:40 marathon pace and be like, I'm banking time for down the line. Instead, have some healthy respect and fear for what if I don't succeed? What if I fail?
That's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
No, that's a lot of good stuff there, because I have to be honest, like right the week before I'm going to run a race, or I'm going to a trail race or whatever, I am literally doing my easy runs, just like picturing finish
Oh yeah.
line, excited. I do that. I'm, oh
So
my
do
gosh, I'm
I.
such a
Yeah,
dork.
totally.
Okay.
Totally. Yeah.
I love it. But I have to be honest, because you just reminded me of a route that I always run about once a month. And it's, just to kind of put in a little context, it's like a 26K route, but it has like 1,600 meters of vertical gain. It is a killer. The
Excellent.
first hill is like 7 kilometers, and it's got 1,000 meters of gain. So I'm climbing this hill, and every single time I turn to my running and I'm like, what? Why are we doing this? Why again have we chosen to go up this treacherous hill? Like, not treacherous because it's not dangerous, but just like this incredibly steep hill where we're not having a good time. And I think that maybe subconsciously I'm thinking of that, like, okay, I'm going to put myself in those really tough situations. I'm going to feel the pain. So when I'm in a race, those hills don't feel as bad. So I guess,
There you go.
I'm kind of working. Yeah.
If
And
I
I
don't
think that
do
I
this,
have
I
a
will
route.
fail. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. I think you can maybe you can have like a happy equilibrium of both and kind of work it in
I
there.
like it. And I like that idea of, to flip back to the kind of process based versus outcome based. That kind of rolls nicely into the idea of the process, right? And embracing the
Yep.
process based goal setting, where you're like, I'm going to build in all of this sort of narrative structure, or these experiences in my life, and with my running practice, to get a little corny, but like I'm going to have these roots. I'm going to have these little challenges along the way, these reminders, these
Mm-hmm.
these tough segments or sequences in my run, where I'm going to have, there's like a little bit of a healthy fear and apprehension, where I'm like, this is hard. This is hard, and
Right.
this is humbling. And on a day where I'm tired and have done a lot of mileage, and it's like mid season, it's tamping me down a little bit, but it's keeping me kind of uh, aware that I'm still not there yet. I love all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
embracing all of that is one of the special aspects of this whole marathon, uh, the cult of the marathon that we are definitely members of, right? So
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. So let's talk about tailoring our goals, so you can kind of dial them in for your fitness level. I think this is one of the
Right.
most challenging things for any runner of any ability level. It gets a little easier as you're a more seasoned veteran of the 26.2 mile tour of whatever city. But I think figuring out what exactly your time-based goal, or your overall kind of like, how do you put a pin on exactly what it is you want to go out and achieve. So how do we, what steps do you recommend we take to set realistic and achievable marathon goals, based on obviously like current fitness level, not the like
Yeah.
dream of
The dream,
one day
exactly.
I'll run the Boston Marathon. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like as a coach, like if I have a new athlete that I'm not as familiar with, what I'll start doing is going through training logs as well, seeing like what they have been doing, talk to them a lot about previous race experiences. And yeah, basically really just that is number one. Apart from, trying to figure out the fitness level, trying to figure out what's attainable. And I do suggest, and I just want to throw this in there as Coach Kate, is that as a beginner marathoner, I really, 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 really suggest that you just do your first marathon to have a good time and to finish. Because I do have, some first time marathoners out there saying, I want to break this time and I want to break this time. And, maybe if you're an experienced runner in general and all your signs point to these times and you've done a ton of half marathons and they've been super consistent, well, you might have something in mind that might be a little easier. But for a true beginner, I think it's important to kind of think like, okay, this first one is my benchmark. I just want to get there. I just want to finish. And then we have that benchmark for future goals and for future time-based marathons. And of course, if you're experienced, well, you're looking at your PR and you're looking at your previous marathons and what you've been able to train for over these past months. So it's all really based around that fitness level. But I also think that you really have to take into consideration some important things like how much time am I going to have available? Am I going to be able for this cycle? Am I going to be able to train 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 6 days a week? What's my mileage going to look like? What is work and family and all of these commitments that you have? And are you going to be able, to get all in? And I think that that's an important part of deciding what your goal is going to be. And I think you need to be easier on yourself if you're not going to have a lot of time, and be realistic and say, this is what I always tell my athletes, please realistically tell me how much you think that you can really commit to training during the week. Because it's not just running, right? I mean, well, at least I'm one of those coaches who's a stickler for strength training. So I've got to have that in there. I want to keep runners injury free. So I'm like a big stickler for it. So I'm like, you got to give me a little bit of time for that. Got to make sure you can sleep most of the time. I know, Michael, you've probably got some, I know you burn the candle at both ends. I know you do.
Yeah, the struggle is real, Katelyn. I don't want to talk about how many hours of sleep I had last night. Let's just say,
oh my goodness,
the over was 6.5. But totally, absolutely, and especially as you age as well. We can do a little like 40 something corner here, but things change, right? And you actually need, in some respects, more time, because you need to spend more time and more focused strength training, more time sleeping, more time warming up. I don't know about you. More time cooling down. And also more time dialing in, that proper approach to fueling, to eating, because metabolism is slowing, and it's just you're the old saying of when the furnace burns hot enough, it'll burn anything. Well, the furnace can't burn hot enough anymore, unfortunately, for me at least. So,
it's cooling off, friends.
It is indeed. It's cooling off. Oh.
I was so jealous when I saw, we were watching the sprint docuseries, and I saw like the sprinters' plates of food, and it was like French fries, potatoes, and like bread. And I'm like, no, okay, that's not realistic in my life. Right? I don't care how many.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Not happening.
Yeah, they're spending a lot of time in the gym, a lot of time lifting, a lot of time doing very, very hard sessions. So, and that's just, but you have to be realistic to kind of bring it back. You have to be realistic about your time.
Right.
And that's a tough thing to do, especially when you've got ambitious goals, right? You got a family, maybe you have children. Mm-hmm. It's hard to train for the marathon when you got kids. Take it from me. And especially young children, right? You've got a relationship, you've got a career, and often this big personal goal of the marathon can kind of, if you're not careful and it can kind of supersede a lot of this stuff, because it's really exciting, it's new, it's very affirmational. It's like people love to talk about it. People will give you a big pat on the back for doing it. It's really ego boosting as well. You're getting fitter. You're telling yourself what you're doing is healthy. You have to be realistic about your time, right? So I would say you got to factor all of that in for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, and also I would say to this, time-based goals or big, sexy achievements like qualifying for the Boston Marathon, you have to put into context. Like, if you're new to running, and maybe you're relatively young, you're relatively fit coming in, maybe you've got an athletic background, and maybe the training is coming pretty easily. You've maybe been running for a couple of years, and you're like, I'm going to jump up to the marathon. And then you're like, I'm going to qualify for Boston. If the fitness test isn't pointing to that, you have to keep in mind that, and this may have changed, but a few years ago, I remember reading a stat that like the average person takes like 9 attempts to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Now, you may not be average. You may be talented to some degree, but you don't know your talent level yet. So like, slow your roll, embrace the process, and maybe you're going to qualify for Boston first shot out of the cannon. Maybe you're not. Have a backup plan, have a longer term goal setting roadmap in place, and accept the fact that maybe you won't qualify for Boston even after a decade. So, and that's okay, because
it's hard.
It's hard
qualifying for the times are super hard. I mean, it's
the Boston
extremely
Marathon.
different.
Yeah,
it's the Boston Marathon.
That's right. You grew up at the foot of the mouth of madness in the Newton Hills. You've watched those
I
people going
did.
into it about to fail, right? You've watched the beginnings of entering the pain cave, right? And
Right at the firehouse, right at the beginning of Heartbreak Hill every year is where I watch the marathon
yeah,
from. It's about 2 miles from the house where I grew up
yeah,
at. So I love the Boston Marathon, live the Boston Marathon. And it is hard. But you know what? Just keep working, keep chipping away, and just remember, like Michael said, it's a process and it might take some time, but it's a process and we can get there.
yeah. Don't fall for the sub trap that I referred to earlier. Don't fall for
Yes, the
this
sub trap.
sub 4, sub 330, sub 250, so whatever. Um, I'll use a personal anecdote, which is
Oh.
2022 Chicago Marathon. I had not really run a marathon, like pandemic kind of, it took the marathons away from us, right, for a while. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know where I was at. I ran a marathon in the spring. Uh, it was like a just get it done marathon. It was a tough
Mm-hmm.
second half. I had to really swallow my pride and adjust my goals and set a goal that, like, I think just a few years prior I wouldn't have been very proud of. But I was like, okay, I'm I have to be realistic about my expectations. So that was a good humbling experience in the spring of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fall of 2022, I got a lot fitter. I kind of Stella got his groove back. Like, I just started to kind of feel it a little bit and put the mileage in, and the pieces were coming together. And I realized that that spring season was part of a process towards the
Mm-hmm.
fall and uh, middle and long term planning, right? And
Right.
I started to try to figure out what my A goal was going to be. And I did not fall for the sub trap in Chicago. I
Good for you.
The numbers were really strongly pointing towards 242 as my number. And it's so tempting to just be like, 2 minutes, sub 240. Let's go. Like,
It's so much time.
let's put that down. Yeah, exactly. But it's like, the ego is like, oh, yeah, like
Yep.
put a 3 there instead of a 4. That's going to feel a lot better.
Yep.
But I didn't fall victim to my own, the devil on my shoulder whispering, like, come on, Doyle. Like, let's just go sub 240.
Let's just go
Let's
for
just go for it.
it.
Set yourself up in the first half and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I was really happy I didn't. I ran 241 something. I
Wow.
very slightly negatively split, but in the second half, which I personally feel is like a testament to kind of like nailing it. And that's the thing I'm most proud of, is when I like even split or very, very slightly negatively split a marathon from first half to second half, because that means that you knew
Hmm.
yourself and you knew where you're at, and then you executed and everything went well that day as well. So, you're fortunate
That's
that
another great goal.
yeah,
That's a great goal for the marathon. I want a negative split.
yeah.
That's a dream.
And not like a crazy 10-minute negative split, because then you're like, what was
Yeah.
I doing in the first half? But like,
Right, right,
just
right,
like a
right.
1 minute negative split, 45 seconds, just
Yeah.
like a couple of like, just you're in command in the second half and you're not bleeding out
Nice.
slowly. And so I didn't fall for the sub trap, and I ran really well, and I was really proud of that one. Right. And I think that
Nice.
should be a kind of an overarching goal for everyone, is like, just be really proud of what you've done. Right. It's
Right.
a big factor in the marathon. It's a big reason why we do it. So last thing here, proven strategies to help you keep motivated and committed through the training journey. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
What would you recommend in that regard?
Okay. Let's see. I mean, I know that there are a lot of people out there who really maybe really like running alone, but I think being part of a running club or having a running partner or someone that you can share something, maybe your running partner doesn't run at exactly your same speed, which is okay because you got, easy runs and you have warm-ups and you have cool downs and you have, a track and can spend a lot of time with people. But I think maybe a running club, other people can motivate you. You talk about running, you enjoy running together. You have a bad day and then, someone else has a bad day and you talk about it
Talk about
and
something
you
else other than running,
wallow.
maybe, but that's impossible.
Well, that's impossible. Just a sidebar. I remember I ran this race called the Coastal Challenge here in Costa Rica, and it's a 6-day stage race, like 250 kilometers. It's amazing.
Cool.
You have to do it. Yeah, it was amazing. And I remember afterward thinking about, we all just like, what is it? Misery company makes misery. What is that saying?
Misery
Loves company.
loves company. Misery makes something about
Yeah,
bedfellows.
something like
And
that.
listeners right now are just like, they're yelling like, it's
Yeah, they're
this,
yelling
you
at, guys, it's
idiots. Yeah,
this.
yes. We know what you're talking about.
But it was hilarious because we would just, there were like 150 of us in the race, and we would just like finish every day at the campsite, like eating legs up. And for the rest of the afternoon, basically not complain, but kind of complain about just how tough every day was, how much we suffered, what things we had. Yeah, it wasn't that hill like this. And yeah, it's just so hot. And this was so hard. And this, and I was like, this is great. Misery loves company. Like, we're just, so I think, that kind of moral support, whether, you're having a bad day together, you're having a great day together, or one's pushing the other one, having those people. And I know Michael runs with a running club for some workouts,
Yeah.
and has some running partners, and you find that really helpful, right?
Super helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
really life-changing, actually. Like, that would be one of my key recommendations for anyone listening to this, especially if you're newer to running, or you've been a lone wolf the whole time. And maybe that's part of your character, part of your aptitude, your personality. Maybe you like doing things solo. And a lot of people who are drawn to distance running like that alone time. I'm definitely one of them as well. Like, I like my me time. I like going out on my own. I especially like the kind of Tuesday, Wednesday evening run by myself, where I generally run Tuesday a little bit longer when I'm starting to get fitter. Not long run, but like longer. Like, I'll do 18, 19, 20, 21K on my own on a Tuesday night. And I just get in my own head and kind of think about stuff, and I start working on the goals, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
joining a club, a group, and just getting together with an informal group of people that are like-minded, and that in some cases, one of the special things about distance running is like, it's meet people from all walks of life. We've talked about this in past pods, where you develop deep friendships with people that you may have not otherwise met. And it's an incredible opportunity to kind of like learn more about the different people that are out there in the world, develop a lot more empathy about other people that live in other socioeconomic circumstances than you do, perhaps, and develop really close friends, and hopefully not talk too much about running, because put a few runners in a room together, it's like it's like a New Yorker cartoon of some kind, where it's just like all you're going to want to talk about is running, right? So
yeah, that happens.
But it's really cool because you can set goals together, you can keep each other in check and honest about your goal setting. You talk about whether or not that person thinks they're realistic for you. You get that you get that feedback from them, and then you can also, like, I travel with my running pals. Like, I'm going to do Chicago.
I do too.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Chicago, and there's like 6 or 8 of us that I know that I run with sometimes or often. The one guy I run with, a few times a week. We're definitely going to be traveling together and hopefully pacing out much of the marathon together. Hopefully the whole thing.
That's the dream.
Yeah, that's another really nice goal to have, right?
Yeah.
So there we have it. Anything else? Any other recommendations?
I would say, I think I mentioned it earlier on, but I would say, if your motivation's a bit down, I think celebrating the small victories is super important. So, I know that I get really frustrated, or in this past marathon process, I got really frustrated on a day where I wasn't hitting my paces in the long runs, because I mixed in a bunch of marathon pace in the long runs, and there were like super winds, and it was really hot, and I was just mad at myself for not hitting the paces, like way too hard on myself. And I think that, you have those bad days, but you also have to celebrate the victories, because I wasn't, super happy and celebrating when all through the week I hit my paces. So it's kind of like, you have to celebrate those small goals that pop up in between, like, oh, look, my cadence today was awesome. It is getting faster. Or, my speed was great. I really felt strong today. So I think that that's also a way that you can stay motivated. And I just wanted to, thinking, Michael mentioned obstacles, and just something else that, can pop up other than demotivation is, maybe an injury or a niggle or something that's bothering you. And I think maybe, we should touch on that, because I think it's, it happens, it comes
Yeah.
up. And that's something that can really, really just bring you down. I mean, what's your biggest, what do you do, Michael, in those situations?
Yeah, I think for me right now at this point in my life, it's very challenging to have a clean sheet when you look at the training plan. So one thing I like to do is, I mean, you can do this with the spreadsheet or whatever if you want to. If you want to just keep it on your phone or keep it on in the cloud. But I physically print out or my program with like every day, the date,
Mm-hmm.
what the expectation is of when I'm supposed to run. It's usually in minutes and then kind of in brackets like miles or kilometers roughly. And then obviously if there's like
Mm-hmm.
specific work like a workout or whatever, if it's a long run, what what are the components of that workout or that long run as well. So I I what I do to keep myself motivated and keep myself honest is I actually write down with a pen next to that day, that run, what I actually did.
Mm-hmm.
And then I grade it. I give a score at a one to 10 of like how I felt about it.
Mm-hmm.
I often write like who I ran with or I ran by myself. And then I sometimes put in a couple little notes, like second half strong, really struggled to keep going in the first half, but sort
Mm-hmm.
of settled down or whatever, and put it into context. So that way I can go back and see if there's, if I'm having any more serious issues, I can backtrack and see if maybe where the
Right.
origin is of it. I have not had many injury issues in the last,
Mm-hmm.
I'm celebrating 11 years injury free.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's like
Yeah. Okay.
that's something that I had a spate of injuries sort of early on in the marathoning journey because I was pushing really hard and doing lots of volume and running really hard all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized like I really like doing this and I want to be doing this for the rest of my life at one point. So I had a
Yep.
major injury before Boston in 2013, and I was like, I'm not going through it. I'm not doing this like this again. So I changed my approach.
Yep.
I would say that if you do start to feel like tightness or like you're getting thrown off for a day, just keep in mind that no one run is going to define your end race. Like
Right.
if you take a day off, it's not the end of the world. It's okay.
Right.
You know, uh, if
Absolutely.
you take a big chunk of time off, you may have to reassess goals A and B, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You may have to opt not to run the marathon. That's okay too. This is a long process. So that would be my recommendations. I mean, I would recommend definitely like write down what you do. I write down what I do, and in fact, at one point, I started
Mm-hmm.
writing my goals down, like at the bottom of the piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
like, and then I would like scratch them out, change them. Like, that's too fast. Let's just tamp this down a little bit. Yeah. So I like that. I'm sure there's some science behind writing this stuff down that we could point to. But it really has always worked for me. When I don't write things down, things get chaotic, they get disorganized.
Mm-hmm. And
I
you will
cut
forget, like
corners. Yeah.
yeah. And you do think, oh yeah, I'll remember this day because it was really great or it was really bad, and you won't. I always ask, I beg my athletes to write the comments in Training Peaks about how they felt, because say I can look at all the data, I can read all of your data, I can compare the data, but if I don't know how you felt, it's going to be really hard for me to interpret that data. So I feel like it's almost more important sometimes than the data itself for me to know how someone felt running and to keep track of that, because I think that way also you can prevent plateaus, you can prevent injuries, you can make and craft the training plan as specific as it needs to be to reach those goals. So I think that's what you said, Michael, about like writing down how you felt and what happened during those workouts and in those runs is like gold
Yeah.
information for the future. So yeah, I recommend that everyone does that.
I have mixed feelings about Strava, as I've mentioned on previous podcasts, but Strava can be really useful in that regard. It can be a great training log. I think, I mean, in many respects, that's sort of where its
Mm-hmm.
origin story is, right? And you could use that. You can make your Strava account entirely private. You can not
Yep,
exist to the outside world on Strava and just log your
that's
run
right.
and then evaluate it. Write down in the comments like how you felt about it, where you
Mm-hmm.
ran, what the experience was like. I find often there's a kind of an arc to my runs. Like easy runs, I often tired, unmotivated, kind of like in the middle of the slog of marathon training. Like, spoiler alert, this is not always going to be enjoyable.
Right.
It's part of the process. You got to embrace the suck. And, you just write down like first, I ran 10 miles, first 4 miles. I was dragging my feet, sweating profusely. Heart rate was too high, running super slowly, not really proud of the pace I was running. But then I started to kind of recover and lock in, and I'm not overtraining. I'm good. It was just, I was not
Mm-hmm.
motivated and I was tired because it's the end of a long day.
Mm-hmm.
You put that into context. Whereas if you get like 4 or 5 days of that in a row, it's like, maybe you're overtraining. Maybe you need to take a bite off.
Something is
Yeah.
happening. Oh, spoiler alert. My newsletter for tomorrow
Yeah.
is going to have information about overtraining in it. So
Sweet.
if you guys are listening to this podcast and you are not subscribed to the newsletter, super important, because I'm going to talk about overtraining actually tomorrow. So when this podcast comes out and the newsletter comes out, you can kind of get into that if you think or worried that you may have some overtraining symptoms.
Subscribe to our newsletter. It goes out 5 days a week. Katelyn and Jesse edit it, and it's great, packed with good content every single day, including what you just teased there, including links to this pod. So, yeah. Okay. So I think we get it all. We good?
Yeah, I think it's pretty complete. I think everyone's going to have a really good idea of how to start thinking up and cooking up these goals. So, on your next easy run, as Michael said, is just solitary easy run, start, considering these things, because if you're already training for the fall marathon, you should already start having these goals in place. So you're motivated and you know what you're working towards and your objectives. So I think that that's just probably our best piece of advice, is to get thinking about it and be realistic and just have a lot of fun in the process.
My goal for this podcast was that we were going to nail this. That was the A goal. And I didn't have a B and a C goal. To hell with our advice. I nailed it. There we go. We did it, Katelyn. We did it.
We did it. Awesome.
All right. So as Katelyn said before, she's done my work for me. Subscribe to our newsletter if you haven't already. 150 whatever thousand people, runners, agree. They subscribe to it as well. So join the team. Join the movement. And
that's right.
If you haven't already, and if you're 100 and however many, 1 hour and 17 minutes into this pod with us, and you've come along on this journey, subscribe to the pod, give it a 5-star rating, write a little review, and let us know. Dangerous in saying this is like reading YouTube comments can be brutal sometimes. Give us a review.
Oh no!
Hopefully you enjoyed this and got something out of it.
Hopefully it's a positive one.
Yeah. Give us a review. Tell us what you think. Honest feedback. We're looking for it. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our compatriot Alex Sear, the master of the master of the YouTube short. He's taken some time away. He's gone back to the homeland. He's on Prince Edward Island in Canada, enjoying a summer reprieve, doing some deep in training, hitting some weddings. There you go.
Yeah, he's got so many weddings.
He's going through that wedding phase of life. Remember that phase, Katelyn?
The age. I remember. Yeah. It's a long time ago.
You probably got like tons of weird bridesmaid dresses in the closet.
That's right. Yeah, I do.
All right. We did it. We'll see you. We'll see you next week.